Hi, this is Nate, and today we are going to be reading Chapter 53, Red Scare. Russia fought with the Allies in World War I until the Russian people decided they'd had enough of the war. It was more important, as far as they were concerned, to solve their own problems. They wanted to get rid of their ruler, the Tsar. They wanted to end the big gap between rich and poor in Russia. They wanted what Americans had wanted in 1776. They wanted freedom. So they had a freedom revolution. At first, it looked as if they might get freedom. The people who overthrew the Tsar were trying to create a democratic government. Then a revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin, who was living in Europe in exile, came back to Russia. That man changed the fate of Russia and the world. He became dictator of Russia. He didn't believe in democracy. So down here we have a picture. And its caption says, Bolsheviks attack the Winter Palace in Petrograd during the October Revolution in 1917. Things had been bad in Russia when the Tsar was ruler. They got much worse under Lenin and the ruler who followed, Joseph Stalin. Lenin and Stalin brought totalitarianism to Russia. They brought repression, murder, state control, and misery. They brought an economic system called communism. Lenin took Russia out of the war. That let Germany move troops from Eastern Europe to France. It made the Great War tougher for the Allies. What does all this have to do with U.S. history? A lot. You see, the world had become smaller. Not smaller in size, but in accessibility. At the beginning of the 19th century, it took at least 2 years for a ship to go from Salem, Massachusetts to China and back. Now, with the telephone, communication was almost instantaneous. Modern technology meant that the ideas of one nation could spread quickly to others. Some people in America were scared by Russia's ideas. They were afraid of communism. Others were attracted to those ideas. Under communism, most property and goods belonged to the state. People are expected to share. That sounds noble. It just never seems to work unless forced upon people. Communist nations have not been free nations. After the World War, some people were scared that communists wanted to take over in the United States. There were a few communists in this country, but they were not successful. Most American people were not attracted to communism. In that same post-war time, there were also some anarchists in America. Anarchists don't believe in government at all. Before we move on to the next page, we have a picture up here in the top right corner. Vladimir Lenin, left, and Joseph Stalin, right, brought totalitarianism to Russia. And then down here we have a box. It says Sacco and Vanzetti. Nicholas Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were accused of murdering a paymaster and his guard at a shoe factory in South Braintree, Massachusetts. Did they do it? Even today, no one is sure, but they were convicted and executed. Sacco and Vanzetti were anarchists, and many said it was radical beliefs that were on trial. The trial was a cause célèbre, which in French means a famous happening. Then we also have a picture to go with it. Nicola Sacco, right, and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, Italian-American anarchists, were convicted of murder and robbery in 1921 and executed in 1927. So, moving on to the next page. You don't have to be very smart to realize that anarchy doesn't work. But when the anarchists looked around and saw poverty, war, and evil, they thought that this was the fault of governments. Some may have really believed that the answer was to do away with all governments. A few tried to do that by setting off bombs intended to kill government leaders. That, of course, was criminal behavior. Newspapers made big headlines of the bombs. Many Americans were frightened. But what A. Mitchell Palmer, President Wilson's Attorney General, did was irresponsible and criminal. He got away with it, but not in the history books. Palmer went on a witch hunt. The witches he went after were communists and anarchists. He took the law in his hands and, in 2 days of raids in major cities in 1920, agents invaded homes, clubs, union halls, pool halls, and coffee shops, rounding up nearly 5,000 people who were held in jail, not allowed to call anyone, and treated terribly. Those without citizenship papers were sent out of the country, to Russia. Most weren't guilty of anything. Communists are sometimes called Reds. Mitchell Palmer took advantage of America's fear of communism. He helped create a Red Scare. He hoped it would make him president. During the Red Scare, Americans were not free to speak out about communism. They weren't free to criticize the government. Some people's lives were ruined. Before we move on, communists were called Reds after the red flag of the Communist International, which was the worldwide communist organization. Witch hunting turns up every once in a while in American history. It happened in Salem, Massachusetts in colonial days. It happened after World War II with a senator named Joe McCarthy. The good thing is, it never seems to last long. Persecution for ideas is not the American way. The First Amendment, part of our Bill of Rights, says, Congress shall make no law, abridging the freedom of speech. Does that mean that communists and anarchists are free to speak out here, as long as they do not engage in criminal activity or plot to overthrow the government? Thomas Jefferson wrote, Truth is great, and will prevail if left to herself, and error ceases to be dangerous when it is permitted freely to contradict them. He believed that when everyone's ideas are heard, people will make wise choices. Do you agree with him? Then we also have a box down here, and it says, in 1789, Congress passed an alien law. It kept certain people from immigrating to the United States. A sedition law made it a crime to speak against the government. People were jailed for their ideas. The people who supported those laws said they wanted to keep dangerous foreigners out of the country. At the same time, the foreigners they feared were French. So that was chapter 53. I hope you all have a great day.